Namaskar. So, today we are again face to face, and the subject again is a little bit, you might think it's abstract, but it's really not abstract. It's quite simple and direct. I know last time we did something about beyond the known, and everybody was completely unknown. I know many people said, oh, it was very nice, but you couldn't understand what's going on. So today I'm trying to make this consciousness simple enough for you to understand. It is simple, but it has been complicated many times. So when we say consciousness, simple, now leave aside all those things which we have learned. Oh, Brahman is the consciousness, Satchidananda consciousness, all that leave alone. Just say consciousness. What do we mean normally by the word consciousness? When I say conscious, when you say conscious, what do you mean? Okay. I go to sleep, I'm not aware or conscious of anything. Maybe I'm conscious of deep sleep, the happiness of being sleepy, but I really don't know, I'm not aware of it. Then I wake up. Then what happens? I become conscious of myself first. Consciousness. I become first I am here. Then I look out. Oh, this is my bedroom. Then that is the window. I can see this. So it starts with first being aware of myself, and then being aware of the other, and then the other, and the other. Then the consciousness becomes a big canopy. It spreads. This is our normal understanding of consciousness. And what do we mean by unconscious generally? Sleep is not unconscious because it seems as if there is a witness, because when we wake up we know that we had a wonderful sleep. But that's not the case. If somebody fell down, hit his head on a rock, or anesthesia was given or something, where your senses are not working, your mind is not working, you're not there for the time being. If somebody hits you with a crowbar on the head, what happens? You fall down, unconscious. That is unconscious. So, and I think there are people try hard all their lives to reach the thoughtless state. The only way to reach a thoughtless state is to fall unconscious. You don't have to work hard, just get somebody to hit you on the head. So that's not the aim of any practice, to become thoughtless. You cannot be thoughtless. When I say I am thoughtless, I am already thinking, I am there, which is thought. So, what is conscious? That means to be aware of the world, to be aware of all that you see, to be aware of you seeing the world. All these things together constitute consciousness. So consciousness naturally means also awareness, because you can't be, if you're conscious, you cannot be not aware of something, especially if you put your mind to it. Okay, now the question is, somewhere along the line, most of the people have, especially those who say they are scientific minded, have associated consciousness, which includes awareness, with the brain. This is it's not a problem, this is what it is normally. Which means they say to be conscious, you need to have the brain, or rather, that consciousness is a product of the brain. This is the usual understanding, and yeah, in a way it is so. But I meaning we, some of us, beg to differ. Okay. What I am going to say now is that consciousness can be there. What do you mean by consciousness? Anything that is aware, alive, and is moving towards happiness and completeness and satisfaction has to be conscious, right? So I'm going to now look at the other side. Keep the brain away. We human beings have a developed brain. Perhaps the consciousness is associated with the brain. It cannot express itself in the human being without the brain, but we are saying that that this consciousness is not a product of the brain. This is what we are trying to say. So is there a consciousness which is there but which, because the brain is so well developed, makes it work in better ways than any other living thing on this earth. I will come to the non-living also, first the living thing. Which is to say that the brain is an advanced computer, and the person who operates the computer is different from the computer. This is what I am trying to say. But of course, to get the complex reactions and exchanges and the growth that the human being goes through, you need an advanced computer. You need a good brain. But the computer, but the human being who is operating the computer in the other sense is not a product of the computer. I hope you grasp what I am trying to say. Yes, we need the brain. Without the brain, you cannot function. You cannot even think higher things or lower things. Yes, because then the brain is so well developed in us that the consciousness can operate through it in the most complex way, which is why the human being has become superior to others. Okay, now without that kind of brain, is there consciousness? In a single cell in the human body or any other single unicellular organism, you don't see the consciousness as we see because we have a complex brain, but even that little thing has its own intelligence. It divides, it multiplies, binary fission. If it is threatened, it moves away. Even the cell system in the human body, it's not controlled by the brain. Each cell has its own intelligence. We are made of thousands of cells. The neural cells make the brain. Agreed. Even those neural cells are not dependent on the brain. The brain is dependent on those neural cells. And each of the cell is intelligent, including any other cell, like the cells of the skin are also intelligent. They are born, they die like human beings. And they are regenerated. If a disease strikes, that means the intelligence in the cell is trying to fight something from external sources. When white blood corpuscles increase in the human blood, that means they are fighting the coming of an invasive cell from somewhere. It could be a virus, it could be bacteria, they are fighting it. So the cells themselves the cells multiply, the cells die, the cells are created. What is cancer? Every cell in the human body, or maybe other bodies, but definitely in the human body, yes, every cell has a certain code in it. It's called a genetic code, by which it says this, it has to multiply this much. When it has multiplied that much, the mechanism of the cell comes into action and says, finished, stop it. It's over, your time is over. New cell has to come. There are rogue cells sometimes who have forgotten the little genetic code which stops the multiplication. Somehow it's missed. We don't know why, but they miss it. So what happens? They go on multiplying endlessly. This is called cancer. Psychologically, a civilization also becomes cancerous when it has forgotten the code to stop somewhere. Goes on expanding, then it becomes a cancerous growth after some time. In everything you can see this, but anyway. So what I am trying to say is that every little cell has an intelligence and therefore it is conscious. Okay, even after death, we don't know what happens after death. The brain is not functioning, but that doesn't mean the cells are not functioning. Cells function for a long time before they die out. They need oxygen, so after some time they die off, but till then they are still functioning. When one is brain dead, that means one is not conscious. That is the final, the doctor says brain dead means gone. But still, there are some cells which are working in the human system. They are conscious, the brain is gone. Okay, now take nature as a whole. When I say whole, I am talking of W-H-O-L-E, not H-O-L-E, whole. Take nature as a whole. Every living thing has intelligence. The plant does not have a brain anywhere. You can't find a particular neural cell gathering anywhere. but it is intelligent. It knows where the sun is coming, it will go that way. How is it going? There is no brain. I am trying to say that in every cell there is intelligence, in every living being's intelligence, therefore there is consciousness. If there is water, the root will grow that side. See this? And if a disease attacks, they develop their own defense. Nowadays they don't get a chance to develop their defense because we put those pesticides and kill them. We not only kill the pest, we also kill the cells. Okay, that's as far as animals. Let's come to animals, from plants to animals. First, unicellular organism. It is conscious. Not conscious in the way we are conscious, but it is conscious. It's evident. It multiplies, it dies, it's born, it's conscious. You touch a cell, you put in a microscope any cell and take something near and touch, it will react. It's alive. Now, plants. Now, wait a minute. Now, don't go to the other extreme. Plants are intelligent, so every day I am stroking the plants and talk, hello darling, how are you? Some kind of rubbish. Anyway, don't worry about that. So, so this consciousness therefore is there everywhere. Okay, we have done plants, let's come to animals. Do you suppose that animals are not conscious? They are very conscious. In fact, some of them are more intelligent, more loving, more compassionate than even human beings, developed human beings. They are conscious. They have brains. From the plant, where consciousness operates without a brain, as an universal consciousness, which probably cannot recognize itself, I don't know. They come to the animal which has brain. It has small brain. Even the smallest creatures have a tiny brain. And of course, the bigger creatures have a bigger brain. But it is not the capacity of the brain that matters, because elephants have a huge brain. They are not as intelligent as we are. So, intelligence and consciousness therefore begins to operate in a slightly different way through the brain when the evolution comes to the animal. But the human brain has an additional factor, and that actually two. One is it has the capacity to visualize. So many neural cells which are important for visualization have been produced in the brain. Are there in the brain. And that is not, animals are intelligent, but they don't have the imagination. The sankalpa is not there, which is a great gift that we have. I would go a step further and say, in a low voice, that sankalpa is not part of the brain, but sankalpa is part of that consciousness, and specialized cells in the brain have been trained to operate with the sankalpa to create things. Let me put it this way. Now, having said that, let's leave it there for the time being and go back to non-living things. We started with plants. What about material things which we normally see, which are in Sanskrit they are called padartha, which means that which doesn't have a jiva, it doesn't have. Even they have consciousness in a way, because there is a built-in consciousness that decides which circle an electron moves in, when the compound has to change from which shell it has to jump to which shell, how many can operate in a circle. Nobody is sitting there and doing, but it is built in. And how long it is going to last. The decaying of the electrons brings about radiation. The movement of the subatomic particles, when they break out, then they radiate. Then, even the smallest quantum particle, and there is something interesting to note, that if you go and look at the subatomic little section, let's say an atom, it's mostly empty space. Here and there are sparks of plus or minus, but it is mostly empty space. And still it functions according to a certain pattern. And now, with our superior brains, we have been able to find out ways even to alter those patterns. But patterns are there. If there are patterns, there must be something there conscious. It may not be self-conscious, but it is conscious. There is something happening. There is an intelligence. Now, even in the smallest brick, which is responsible for this universe that we see, even starting from something smaller than the atom, subatomic, and even smaller than the quarks, or even quantum, little quantum, what are they called? We can't call them particles. Some word. Let's say the bricks of nature, which are the quantum subatomic things. Let's say things. We can't say particles for a reason. I am telling you why. Now, this cannot, none can be seen through even the most powerful electron microscope. Maximum we can see is a single cell or something. Beyond that, no atom can be seen in an electronic microscope, even with an electronic microscope. I learned this the hard way. I wrote a book once and said about how in an electron microscope we can see the electrons. So, a very important scientist, Dr. George Sudarshan, who is famous for physics, he founded the Sudarshan effect. He used to work, a professor in Austin. He told me, you need to make this correction because we cannot see any of the quarks or any of the quantum particles or any of the atoms or electrons with an electron microscope. You know only they exist because of the reactions. So in this big physics lab, there are these reactors. In reactors, according to their magnetic reactions and activities, one knows this is an electron, this is this is that, this is that. So the smallest, the point of this whole of quantum particles or quantum bricks is called, I think it's a quark, or doesn't matter what, let's say smallest quantum particle. The thing is, you can't call it particle, as I said, simply because the scientists have observed that when you think it's a particle and you're watching its reactions and it reacts like suddenly it shifts and begins to react like a wave. Then you think it's a wave and you're watching, it shifted into a particle movement. So nobody even knows whether the smallest quantum thing is a particle or a wave because it keeps moving between the two. In fact, some people have gone to the extent of saying that it depends on the observer, the conscious observer. Maybe when you observe, it begins to change. Now, what does it indicate? That when you observe, it begins to change means what? Means it is also in its own way aware and conscious. Not in the way that we are with brain consciousness. In its own way, it has its own consciousness. It changes. So, this movement. So, from the quark, from the subatomic, from the quantum material, there is some kind of rudimentary consciousness. When I say rudimentary, that doesn't mean it doesn't work well, it works. It doesn't have the organism called the brain through which it works directly. So, there is consciousness there. Well, it requires a lot of research. I am sure at some point physicists will come to understand this more clearly. We are saying out of our own understanding and experience that from the quark, from the quantum to the material objects, to the cells, single cells, to the trees, to the animals, to the human being, there is consciousness. As a whole, there is consciousness. Now, except that in the human being, or in others, it works through a certain center, and in the human being, this consciousness works through the brain. And it works better than other living beings at least, because it is a much more developed and evolved brain. We can even go one step and say perhaps the consciousness, which is as a whole conscious, worked on the cells of the body to refine it and get these neural cells, which are neurons, because of which we feel conscious as we feel conscious. Others may be conscious, but we feel conscious. Now, therefore, the question here is, traditionally, consciousness, there is no such specific word in Sanskrit for consciousness, there is chitta. And chitta could mean mind, it could mean the source of the mind also. So, according to the yoga and Sankhya philosophy, the mind, which is chitta, which is conscious, it could be with brain, they are not discussing the brain here, chitta, which is conscious, has many distractions and waves and movements in it. The same mind, one part of the same mind, seeing these disturbances, wants to see how it would look if these disturbances are cleared. It's again the same chitta, there is no external person sitting out there. When these distractions and waves are cleared, when the vrittis of the chitta have been removed, then that chitta in its pure state is not different from Purusha, and Purusha is consciousness. So we are saying that the true essence of consciousness is beyond the brain but functions through the brain. And if you have to touch that consciousness which is not part of the brain, with its activities and so on, it is memories, with its activity, with emotions, with its reactions, then perhaps when that becomes still and quiet, then you experience that consciousness which is other than merely brain consciousness. Now Vedanta, the Upanishads have described that consciousness as Satchidananda for a reason, because Sat meaning free from the conditionings of the brain and some such and other instruments through which it functions generally. If it can be freed from that, in its pure state, it is Sat, that is the real state of the consciousness. It is Chit because it is conscious, even without this, and it is Ananda because it is in its true essence intrinsically happiness. And it is because the source of all living beings, including human beings, is this happiness, that the human being also using the brain tries to find happiness, some kind of happiness. It is a built-in system, everybody wants happiness in some way or the other. It doesn't matter if they suffer, but they still want to be happy. Somebody commits suicide because they get rid of it. Maybe if sorrow goes, then I am happy. So this movement towards fulfillment, happiness, this is the whole center of civilization. All civilization has come because we want to expand, because we want to improve, we want to become more refined, we want to experience more happiness. We are saying that quality is actually the quality of pure consciousness, which in our case operates through the brain and operates in a brilliant way because different brains are made in different ways. Although the cells are the same, nobody has actually found out whether a genius's brain has more neurons or we don't know. Research is still going on in neurology, which is a good thing. So what I am trying to say again today is that consciousness is an all-pervading something which we cannot define. And brain is a product of evolution which has become so refined and functional that the consciousness is able to function through it in a beautiful way, in a great way, like a man operating a very advanced computer. Similarly, if that was not the case, I won't be sitting here and talking to you in such detail and so subtly about consciousness. I can do it only when the brain operates. My only argument is that when this brain is dead, consciousness is not dead. That's all I'm trying to say. Also they are trying, a lot of research is going on in a coma state. What happens to the mind? What happens to thought when the brain seems to be totally gone in the coma state? So a lot of research needs to be done, but we are saying from the research done for by the ancient sages, they have come to this understanding that consciousness is all pervading. Consciousness is Purna, complete. It operates through the brain, but the brain is not consciousness. But for us to live a life and operate, we cannot get the consciousness to operate without the brain. When we understand that perhaps the consciousness is there even when the brain is not functioning, then probably we are touching that essence of consciousness. And once that is touched, you probably can operate even without the brain for some things, not for everything. So, the talk on consciousness is ended. It's merely food for thought. So, give it some thought and try to figure out for yourself what I was trying to convey. Thank you very much. Namaskar.